All right, so as we transition from the interview questions, we're going to talk about ADA and EEOC laws and regulations. So I asked the interviewer, or interviewee, sorry, Mrs. Kalen, what were five laws that you felt were very pertinent to your organization as a human resource manager? And these were the five she provided to me: Americans with Disability Act, Washington paid sick leave slash paid family medical leave, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, Washington pregnancy accommodation law, and short term disability slash substance abuse. Um, so Wash Americans with Disability Act. She said this was a really big one for her organization because they hire people with disabilities, and by law they are required to make reasonable accommodations for them without compromising the mission of the organization, the task of the organization, or creating further safety concerns for other employees. So that's where that whole reasonable accommodation comes in. And she talked about the process that they use, like approach HR, and HR will talk to leadership and figure out what is the definition of reasonable for your disability to happen. And then we look at Washington State paid sick leave, paid family medical leave. So with sick leave, obviously you are by Washington State up to 40 hours is what you were allowed on an annual basis. But with Crown, it can roll over to a certain maximum level. And then paid family medical leave, they are allowed to take up to 12 weeks of paid family medical leave, which is funded by the employer and insurance that they put money into per a certain period of time. So I I know one organization that I used to work for. It was you could take PMFLA once within every 12 months because it takes that amount of time. And then another one with how their insurance was paid out, it was per so many hours that you work. You have to work so many hours before your PMFLA time resets. That way, obviously, you're putting money into that. Um, and then obviously Title VII of the Civil Rights Act is very important. Obviously, we don't want any discrimination that is based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. And that even includes pregnancy, which is why she said pregnancy was a big one there. They had a slew, or sorry, slew is not the right word. They had females at work that were becoming pregnant within the office from their personal lives out, obviously personal lives coming in, and they were pregnant, and they had to give them reasonable accommodations. They had to give them nursing rooms. They had to um, allow them to take a little bit longer breaks than other ones, obviously, because their body's going through changes. So they had to accommodate them a little bit more than normal workers, making sure that they have privacy, they have certain snacks they need to help themselves out. And then short-term disability and substance abuse was one that kind of surprised me. I've never heard of it before, but she says that they look at a lot of employees they've had because of the stress of the job or just the region that they're operating in. They had a lot of drug abuse for a certain amount of times, and whether it was alcohol or other harder narcotics, and they would provide the support to that employee as long as the employee came first asking for help, and HR would help them out with that with the through the employee assistance programs that they had in place um, for their organization. So very critical things, very refreshing things to actually see that they're realizing that their employees are not just employees but human beings, and they have programs in place for them with part of their employee assistance program. So really impressive. Moving on to job descriptions. So had to build two job descriptions in here. The two job descriptions that I built, one was for a maintenance manager and one was for a maintenance worker. I was trying to think of, okay, what's two that kind of relate to Crown but not really. And the ones that she provided me for was one was a branch manager, and which obviously would have been a exempt job description, um, solely because for exempt means that they um, are typically salary. So they're not an hourly employee, and non exempt means that their hourly wages, not salary. So they're not they have different little rights with that. So I picked a maintenance manager for my exempt and a maintenance worker actually for my job description, and those were pretty fun to do. I'd seen a lot of job descriptions 'cause I've been applying for jobs a lot recently, and I've had a HR class before we actually had to do this, and I'm actually going through a class now that breaks down how to apply for jobs, resumes, and that. So it was really fun to kind of sit in this and see it from a different angle with how laws are in place and how laws affect a job description. Um, with that, so transitioning on to the training curriculum outline. Um, I kind of like this. I mean, I know I've talked about PIPs and KIPs and coachings and everything else in a previous one, but this one was a really fun for me one. I used to be an instructor teaching leadership in the Army, and one of the things I really liked was this. So I built a introduction orientation course that lasted 3 weeks. The first 4 5 days of work, 6 days of work were extremely critical: shadowing, briefings, HR, OSHA, safety coordinators, things like that. And it worked out really good. Where in the week 3, it was kind of the closeout of it, of their quote unquote probationary period, where they got assessed by talking to HR and their supervisor of where you can improve and not. So it's really fun to do. I think it's a very critical thing to make sure you have a good outline, and so that way management and leadership and HR can all be on the same page with developing somebody. Moving on to this one was really fun because I'm actually struggling with this right now. I'm trying to get into the HR world, and I'm joined the recent chapter within my region around Lacey for the HR industry for through HSRM. But talking to her was really fun because she's actually in Lacey and she's part of that chapter too. So she kind of helped me get into there. But she brought up a couple of major things, which I'm noticing is very true right now with getting into it. And one is networking. She says, like, through her experience, she never intended to go into HR. She actually grew up in the banking world and showed attention to detail and was able to coach people and train people. And as time progressed, she actually got offered a HR job, um, manager actually, with her college degree and everything else. So networking is a very big part of it to getting in there. And then having a certifications degree plan. She said having just a degree in relevant areas like communication, psychology, or business will help you get into that world. Having your HRIS certifications, your human resource certifications, was that she says if you can't met the minimum, start with the basic level entry HR job. She says that's another way to get into it. Find a mentor. That was real critical for her. She says that's what actually drew her into the HR world. She had a couple really good mentors, um, who took her under her wing and taught her and how to navigate the world. And then she says, once you get inside the HR world, learn as much as you can, as many functions as you can. If I remember correctly, I think there's 13 responsibilities that HR representatives are responsible for, HR departments responsible for an organization. Learn them all. That's what she said. And then lastly, stay humble and adaptable. Um, be flexible. You're learning. The human resource world is always adapting, always changing, and no one's the best, regardless of how good you may think you are, how bad you are, to be honest. Um, she said, just stay humble. Learn that the next person that walks in the door could teach you something you never knew. So challenges that she had some pretty good challenges. Two of them I'm going to kind of tie together. Adopting changes in office politics. So she had a situation where a veteran employee made a comment about this is why women shouldn't be doing this job. But because this was the first statement or negative thing that had ever happened with this employee, the leadership decided to give that person another chance because it was like it's the first time this ever happened. This isn't like him. He was just lost his cool for a second and let whatever was in his head speak when he shouldn't have. Um, and she said that was really hard for her to because she was like, that's discrimination. That shouldn't be accepted inside of a business. So it was very hard for her to sit here and be like, hey, like I can't, like part of her's like I can't be part of this, like I can't accept this, like this is not what I stand for as a person, as a, in my belief system. And the other part was, but this is my job, so I have to be the best I can be, right? I have to be the best. And so sitting there in office politics, and she said she had to bite her tongue and just advise them what was best, what she thought was the best action as a HR human resources professional, and go from there. And then last thing was significant emotional events. She said that when she first started during COVID, they had a person whose family member passed away during COVID, and then shortly thereafter that person passed away from COVID, and no one in work was prepared for it. So and they leaned heavily on her as a human resource professional to figure out what to do. And she had to figure out, like, she had to go and drop off baskets from work for a family member she had never met at their place of residence while the emotions were still raw and they were still grieving. But she did some really cool things too. She also built a memorial at workplace so that way they remember him, that she says is still there to this day. So that was really fun and cool to see, like, different challenges. Obviously office politics is probably one of the hardest things that anyone can ever have, because laws are laws, and sometimes HR has to quote unquote be the bad guy, as she said. But you know, you gotta figure out where the balance is and where the line's going to be drawn with the office politics, and helping your organization adopt changes that are being accepted in society. So, all right. So, in conclusion, kind of talk about some of the stuff that we've already talked about. That was really fun. As you've seen, working in human resources industry is a journey. You're going to learn a lot, whether you're going through the institutional way of learning, or whether you're getting an entry level job, or whether you're just getting guided by a mentor to it. It's a journey to go through. I think one thing that she said for advice too, in conclusion, that I've also seen with writing this paper, is find relevant laws for the organization, right? Because whether you work for a nonprofit, whether you work for a manufacturing facility, you're going to have different laws that apply to you. And so that's very important to keep in mind, just like how she brought up the Clean Air Agency or Act, for the Olympic area. Very important things to look at. And then lastly, the biggest thing I say is human resources builds a organization. They are the people who help build the foundation, help instill a good culture, help make it thrive, make it strive, make it become something successful. So, in conclusion, I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. I had fun. It was good seeing you guys again, and hopefully I didn't um overtalk too much stuff. I just appreciate you taking the time to listen, and I hope that you have fun thinking about what everything I presented today. Thank you. Have a good day.